Welcome to our next session of Virtual Roundtable and the Symposium of the Visual Arts Circle. Our speaker this time is Magdalena Brzezinska. Magdalena is a graduate of Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, Poland. She is an EFL teacher with over 20 years of experience, a teacher trainer with over 10 years of experience, an international conference speaker, and a sworn translator and interpreter. At present, she teaches general and business English to students of the WSB University in Poznań, Poland. She enjoys regular and online PBL, and she believes in the value of visual arts in language education. She's a member of FILTA and membership officer for the International Visual Arts Circle. In her free time, she organizes international collaborative projects featuring participants, art, and literature. Over to you, Magdalena.
Thank you very much, Oksana. I'm so impressed with your Polish. Your Polish is great. You could pronounce all the names correctly, and even my surname, which is always, such a problem. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much to Rob and to all of the other participants, and also to Heike, who introduced me to Adobe. And thanks to her, I hope I know how to operate everything. Oh, Rob, I don't know if this is better than yours. I'm not sure, but yeah, okay, I'm not going to, to make any enemies here. So yeah, thank you so very much. I hope not everyone is asleep. But what I want to discuss tonight is in addition to being everything EFL, I'm an unfulfilled artist, and that's most probably the reason why I have always smuggled art in multiple forms into my classroom. And any pretext, any excuse was good, and it was good enough. And I discovered that what, yeah, I am hiking, and I discovered that what worked especially well with virtually any age group was street art. And I discovered that even if you're not an art lover, you never visit any galleries or museums, you don't have one single picture on your wall, and even if, or maybe just because you are a rebellious teenager, you will hardly be indifferent to street art. Um, and no, I hope I can. Oh, yes, I don't know why it's moving this way, but okay, it's wiser than me. So what I discovered is that street art speaks to you because it surrounds you. Graffiti and murals are everywhere, and you can see them from your car, from the bus, just walking by. Sometimes street art annoys you. Other times it intrigues you. Sometimes it enchants you. But it can be anything from a zigzag on a wall to a beautiful work of art. And there is space for all of that in your EFL classroom. Street art is a wonderful inspiration, and it can be used for a wide array of activities. And I'm hoping to share my ideas with you and inspire you too. Some inspiration may come from very simple ideas, like pen and paper ones, but I also and some other ones that I have in store are high tech and interactive ones. So I hope there is something here for everyone, actually. And right. So to introduce street art into your classroom, you can obviously use online resources or your own photos, but what works best, and it really does, is simply taking your students to see the art for themselves. So if you can do it, just do it. It is quite different when you see something on the screen without the context, even if it's beautiful, even if it's thought-provoking, it is quite one-dimensional. And on the other hand, in the context, when you're outside, the piece of art acquires a totally new value and depth. It occupies public space. Um, and for example, I took this photo at a conference in Serbia, and it occupied public space. You notice how unexpected it is, how sometimes it breaks the rules, how subversive, how insurgent it can be. Once you saw it, you cannot unsee it. And this happy face and the flowers among all the notices and ads, it immediately caught my attention. And this brings us to the first activity I want to discuss. And it's here you can see Bowie that we already saw with Kieran, right? So this activity is like, who is it and why are they here? As most of you, all of you know, very often graffiti or murals depict people. If these are celebrities, in your EFL classroom, you can use the images as prompts for discussing who these people are. What thank you so much. Who these people are and what they are known for, why they are famous. On the left, for example, you can see a photo I took in Boston 2 years ago, and here you could discuss why the students thought the artist painted Prince and David Bowie, why they were put in this image together, and maybe your students could compare and contrast the musicians, their looks, their music, anything that comes to their mind. You could follow up by discussing whether it was actually appropriate to put the information that the viewer could win a free meal at our restaurant, which is advertised above the mural. What do the students think? Why do they think so? Is it appropriate? And on the other hand, if the person depicted is or seems unknown, like the one on the right, which is actually my creation, you may ask your students to guess who it is and why the artist wanted to display the image of that person in public space. Why should this person be there? Why the artist thought it was important, it was necessary. Thank you very much, Kieran. And you can decide whether sorry, you can ask your students to come up with a person's story. Who is this person? You can practice description. Thank you, Oksana. You can practice adjectives, tenses. Options here are limitless. You know, I guess most of you, maybe all of you are teachers, and you know that there are just so many things you can do with an image of a person. Another thing, and this was something that was that I learned from a MoMA course in which I took part. It was Art and Inquiry, is that you can also give your students copies of the image and ask them to complete it with some scenery, and only then ask them to write the person's story. So this is about people. Now, the next one here is, of course, you know, street art that is particularly powerful is one that is connected with political or social campaigns. It usually evokes very strong emotions and very strong reactions. You can easily use it as a teacher to trigger a discussion or a debate. And in this photo, for example, you can see a mural painted by Polish artist Dariusz Paczkowski. I will talk about him again. And he's very well known for his political and social campaigns. They are very powerful. Some of them are very, very controversial. And this particular one was a protest against reckless rubbish burning. So what the teacher could do here is the teacher could ask students my 3 favorite questions. Again, they are often used by MoMA educators. What do you see? What do you notice? And what makes you say that? And well, what is very, very important, and we often forget about it, I mean, maybe not you, but I do, I know it, is that I have this tendency to speak a lot and to speak fast, as you can probably hear now. And it's very hard to actually give your students time and shut up, stop for a minute, like not force anything upon them. Try not to prompt, just what do you see? What do you notice? What makes you say that? And after each question, there should be a pause. They should have their time for thinking, for like coming up with ideas. And really, the silence can kill you, but it's worth it. And after that, after the discussion, a debate could follow. For example, half of the students would be against burning rubbish, which is something that every one of us, I guess, is against. But the other half would be for. And actually, I discovered that this was quite interesting to make students argue for a point they are actually against. Um, Many of them, after the class, mentioned that it was quite an eye-opening experience. Maybe they were not convinced that their opponents were right, but still they felt, okay, I don't agree with them, but I can see their point. And yes, yes, Kieran, that's right. That's right, yes. And a follow-up, after discussing or after debating connected with such strong political or social images could be designing a social campaign, and I will discuss it very soon. Um, so here, okay. So as I said, street art does not need just to be just about viewing, about discussing. It can actually be a wonderful inspiration. And soon I'm going to discuss the following mural and graffiti inspired ideas, from relatively simple ones as headline poetry, or creating and using stencils and creating students' own graffiti, to as complex ones and multi-layered ones as designing a social campaign or developing an interactive virtual walk. And here's headline poetry. 90% of the photos here are, uh, well, they've been taken by myself, and it's actually my students' work, and I really love it. So for headline poetry, what you need is a pile of magazines or newspapers, some paper, preferably colored one, scissors, glue, and a lot of student creativity. Students are shown a mural or some graffiti, they discuss it, and the next step would be asking them to create poems using cutout sentences or words. Preferably, these would be headings, although advertising slogans work very well, and they are very tempting too. And the activity is a bit messy, quite time consuming, but it's worth it, I promise. I used it over and over again. It always proves successful. And there is certain charm in leafing through magazines, selecting sentences, words, or even images to go with your poem. Um, Arranging all this, gluing this to paper, and even the poem that you are creating can become a piece of visual art, as can hopefully be seen in my students' creation on the left. So you can see that this is art in itself. So it's not just viewing art, discussing art, debating. It's also creating art. And this is the first step, or maybe the simplest one, because you don't need to actually create anything on your own. You are helped by magazines. Um, Now, here you can see Dariusz, the person that I mentioned before, Dariusz Paczkowski. And this is another creative follow-up. And it can be making and using graffiti-inspired stencils to decorate students' t-shirts or bags. The painting process can be followed by discussing why a particular stencil was designed, why this one, what does the author want to communicate to the world? The student, the person is going to wear it, so it's some kind of a message to the world. What is this message? What did you want to say? What are you trying to communicate to the world? Also, was the creation process easy or was it difficult? What was the most discouraging part? What was the most rewarding part? As I said in the photo, you can see the Polish mural artist I previously mentioned, Darek Paczkowski, and actually we taught this graffiti workshop together. So I focused basically on discussing and on giving students vocabulary, and he focused on what he's great at, which is stencil and mural creation. He helped my students to succeed, and this was fabulous. This was great. Here again, you can see me with very young students, and another activity I wanted to suggest, I wanted to encourage you to try out is you don't need to limit yourself to just a stencil. You can actually encourage your students to paint or draw their own graffiti. It can be done simply on paper, but preferably on a wall, if you have one at your disposal, that is. And in the photos, you can see very young students, and they are creating simple graffiti on paper. The theme was, what are you afraid of? And it was a chance for them to learn new vocabulary and discuss their fears. We talked about ghosts, we talked about spiders, we talked about darkness, we talked about confinement. So like this was 2-in-1, learning English, but also going deeper, discussing emotions. And I found it very powerful. And also another thing, co-creating a large piece of art and experiencing this synergy, you know, the participation of so many peers with just, you know, just co-creating something and being a part of something bigger and creating this synergy and experiencing it. I found it pretty empowering, and I hope you will too if you decide to try this out. The next activity I wanted to suggest was designing a social campaign. And this is definitely an activity for older and more advanced students. They need to be, well, quite proficient when it comes to their language, but also, you know, their knowledge of life needs to be quite broad. And I already discussed it briefly when I talked about the street art protest against, Kieran, yes, the graffiti activity working well with younger learners and teenagers, yes. And here the social campaign. I mentioned the street art protest against irresponsible rubbish burning, and it's a part of that. This is what Dariusz was involved in. And your students can actually design a social campaign using murals and graffiti to promote some socially desirable phenomena, some socially desirable changes. You can even do this throughout the school year. It can be a very complex, long-term, multi-step project in which all the EFL skills or all the IT skills and student creativity can be fostered. Why IT? Because the project can be designed and displayed online. Students can blog about it. They can advertise it on social media. They can also respond to comments from blog visitors, which will get them even more engaged in the project. I tried it out, and it really does. It gets them even more engaged because they can see that people watch their art creations. They have some impressions. They share their emotions and impressions with the students, and students really feel that this is something that is it is impressive. It is actually something that that is very engaging, and it further improves your students' EFL skills. Another complex activity or project, because as Oksana said, I'm very much into project-based learning, is designing virtual interactive walks. And I'm a fan. This one was actually created by me using the Experience City platform. And back then it was completely free. Then I know it turned freemium. And I really don't know how free it is now, so I'm not going to advertise the platform, but you may try it out. It's Experience City. However, as good things in life are seldom free. It can be premium, or maybe you need to pay for it. But anyway, the idea is that if there are several murals or interesting graffiti pieces where you live, you can create this online walk, this interactive online walk. A couple of street art pieces should be selected, and each one of them should be placed on an interactive map. Of course, they should be located relatively close to each other, because then we will make the walk realistic, because actually we are designing it online. But then our visitor, thank you, Heike, our visitor is supposed to actually walk and do things in situ, so to say. That is why your walk needs to be realistic. So the students create a route, like from one mural to another, from one piece of street art to another. And at each mural, the visitor is asked to do something related to street art. It can be anything of your choice. Well, they can be asked to take a selfie, to write a poem, to draw something, to perform some task, like physically. And it's just, your imagination, or your students' imagination rather, is the limit. And in the slide that you can see now, yeah, you can see my own station at a mural dedicated to Irena Sendler. Maybe some of you know the name. It's a Polish righteous among the nations, and she kept information on true and false identities of the children she rescued, hidden in a jar buried in her garden. And in this particular case, when you look at my interactive walk at the slide here, this fact was used as a prompt to discuss how my students, or how the visitor, could secure some very important information. And as I hope I mentioned previously, the answers can then be shared online. So yes, life in a jar, that's it, yes. So thank you, Heike. So if there are any interesting graffiti pieces, any interesting murals in your city, in your town, you can try this out, and and then walk there with your students. Let them test it. This is very interactive. They use their mobile devices, and I found it a very inspiring, a wonderful activity. Although, as I said, it's quite complex, it's very time consuming. My students also advertised the activity on their blog, and they also got like comments and suggestions from the readers, and they responded in English. So I guess, well, I know that their English skills and that their IT skills improved enormously, and also they rediscovered their city. They actually paid attention to some things that they haven't before, which was great, and yeah, no, the children were not put in a jar. What a relief. Okay, since I discussed World War II, very, very, powerful and painful and difficult topic, it brings us to another, yes, to famous Banksy, to another very important issue that can be examined and discussed using murals and graffiti, and I mean peace, obviously. And at this point, I'd like to say that the world should be grateful, and especially the ELT world should be truly grateful to Banksy for his art, for his use of peace symbols, which is so unexpected, which is so ironic, that it's almost impossible not to have an opinion about his creations. And I used his murals over and over again, and again, students who never pay attention to any art, don't have a picture on their wall, who are teens, who are rebellious, who don't care about art, they do care about Banksy, and I will show you in a sec that it's quite justified. So for example, what is really moving for my students? I tried this activity, it works. I promise you can test it on your own, is impersonation. So like you ask your students, you ask your students to put themselves in the character's shoes. So students become mural characters. Um, they can talk or write about why they are doing what they are doing here as characters in the mural. And yes, yes, Karen, yeah, that's right. And you can ask them to discuss what Valeria mentioned before, the when, the where, the how of their actions as these particular characters. Also, they can talk about their senses, uh, being characters. What can they see? What can they hear? What can they smell? What can they taste? Um, this is very powerful. You can revise lots of vocabulary or even teach a lot of vocabulary, but it's again something that touches them, that moves them, that they think about it a long time after you finished your class. Another, maybe a little bit grammatical approach is that you discuss what happened immediately before the scene depicted in the mural and what will happen afterwards. This is, again, an excellent tense practice. And once this was done, you can move on to stickers and tattoos because the teacher can show students images of stickers into which Banksy's murals were turned. Um, Students may decide whether they feel this is appropriate, whether, especially politically loaded murals or socially loaded murals should or could be used as wall decoration, right? Something that is maybe some meaningless piece of art on the wall. Is this appropriate? They might also discuss if they would want any reduced mural tattooed on their skin. Which one and why? Oh, thank you for your suggestion, Oksana. I have just noticed it. Okay, I'll take a screenshot. Okay, thank you so much. Um, so, okay, I was talking about the tattoo, and this activity was actually inspired by my very own student who has a Banksy tattoo. And again, he's one who doesn't care about art too much. He told me he just doesn't care. But then when we discussed Banksy, he said he actually had his art tattooed, and that was so amazing. Um, and the last thing I want to talk about is you can actually ask your students after discussing Banksy's art, Banksy's creation, as the last stage of a class dedicated to peace or to Banksy, whichever you prefer. The last stage could be asking your students to design their own peace signs and their own peace symbols. This can be done individually. This can be done in pairs. This can be done in groups. The sign could be as simple or as complex as you wish or as they wish. It can be as simple as an impression of a student's palm, which you can see on the left, or as complex as a detailed drawing, which you can see, top right. And the teacher will surely be able to determine which option is the most appropriate for her or his students. It's easy to see if, they are more into art or maybe they just want something simple. Everybody can actually, put some paint on their palm, on their hand, and try to create a sign that would be meaningful and that would maybe possibly mean peace, right? So maybe go simple, maybe go more difficult. And I discovered that in a multilingual, multicultural class, what students can do is they can just put the stylized word peace in their own language on paper. And okay, yeah, I'm all of them, yes. So like it works beautifully, especially like with Japanese handwriting or Chinese handwriting or Armenian handwriting, because it doesn't, like, to us Europeans, it doesn't resemble, our usual way of writing. So it is pretty much a sign, it is pretty much a symbol. And another thing that works beautifully and evokes very strong emotions is an exchange of such peace signs. Um, I could see it in real life, very moving. It really bonds and connects people. When they exchange their peace signs or the word peace written in their own language with another person from a different culture. Uh, really moving, very powerful. And here's the last slide, but I still want to use my 5 minutes, or maybe 3 now. Um, In my talk, I wanted to share with you, the participants of this wonderful virtual roundtable, my love for street art, and to give you some specific tips on how I use this art and how it can be used in your EFL class successfully, to improve students' knowledge, to improve their skills, like anything from paper to computer, right? And also to inspire them to create, to show them that, creation doesn't need to be intimidating. It doesn't need to be something that is bigger than you. You can create, you can be an artist. And I hope I was successful in doing that. And thank you so very, very much for your time, for your attention. And I hope to see you in Athens. And I was so very happy to meet so many wonderful speakers and many wonderful participants here. Thank you so very, very much.